I'm Brian Hill. I'm from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I like drums. In addition to being a former musician, drummer, percussionist, and drum technician, I collect old drums. Some of them are vintage, but the most interesting ones I collect are for a series called The Drums of War. We do a series of essays on these called On the Ropes, and we try to find drums that can tell a story so we have something to write about. Every drum we have has a story, whether it's a maker, a soldier, a unit, or is just a unique piece of history. It's part of a museum series that Rob Cook and I, and as well as George Lawrence, were doing to make the show a little more interesting, allow people to bring in something that they have that they think is special, museum quality, very collectible type of a percussive item that they could display for whatever reason. The bass drum that I brought this year was a 27.5 by 13 inch 2-ply walnut drum, which was in really what I like to call farm fresh condition. When I found it, it was a pile of parts and a bag of parts. It took me a few years to figure out how to bring it back together. It is a late 1850s, early 1860s drum, more than likely Confederate, Virginia based, as it is made of walnut, and the majority of the walnut being used at the time was coming out of Virginia, specifically the Harper's Ferry area. Even the Springfield Arsenal got their wood from Harper's Ferry for the stocks of the Springfield rifles. It's 2 plies of walnut with 3 stay rings, with the inside running short, which gives the drum a very low-end sound. It does have a nice iron hook to attach to, maple counter hoops, and a couple of brass eyelets for air vents. Big boomy drum, but it came from the scrap pile and now it's a player. One of the cases that I brought this year was more naval in nature. It was a Civil War nature. It's a pair of USMC marked drumsticks made of rosewood, as well as a couple of all-wood bass drum beaters that all came out of the same estate, probably all Marine Corps Naval. There's a lemon peel bass drum beater in there from a GAR Naval Station 111, fife and drum corps, all etched into the leather lemon peel. Nice little beater there. The others had a variety of sticks and brass stick carriages, which are pretty pricey, fairly rare in nature. They used clip on the sling or on the edge of the drum. Most of the drummers threw them away. So the surviving examples are pretty rare and are getting quite pricey. I found a very rare canvas pitch-covered drum bag from the Civil War era. Most of them were destroyed, lost, nobody knew what they were. Very few surviving members, very rare, more than likely Union. Most of the other examples that I've seen have been hard clamshell type cases that a bandsman would carry. This might have been a company drummer bag, but we'll never know. There's no markings on it. The other drum we brought this year was made by William Tompkins of Yonkers, New York. Tompkins was an incredible craftsman of his time, and he always jumped on the new stuff. He's mostly noted for inlays, therefore his drums are all 2-ply. The example we brought today is one of just a few known where it's not inlaid, but rather painted ornately, telling a story that we like to call the cost of war, where we've got a bugler, a battle scene, and a mourning soldier. The drum is from 1862. I do believe it is an answer to Shiloh, Wilson's Creek, and First Bull Run, in that the war was not going to be a 3-month party. It was going to be a costly affair. Okay, one of the nicer drums we brought this year was the Charles W. Bonner drum, which is a Western-made drum, Civil War, more around the 1860 manufacture, rough construction, short drum. Charles Bonner was a 21-year-old enlistee when he joined Company A of the 11th Missouri. He was the son of a preacher, and he went in as a drummer, a company drummer. And during the Battle of Corinth, they had charge of defending Battery Robinette, which was being assaulted at the time by the 2nd Texas Regiment. That regiment was led by Colonel William Rogers, whose troops had been repulsed twice on that by Company A of the 11th Missouri, Charles Bonner and his friends. On the third charge, William Rogers' horse was shot out in front, under him, and the color bearer beside him was shot down. Colonel Rogers picked himself up, picked that flag up, that Confederate flag, ran to the top of the parapet. At that point, Charles Bonner, the drummer, had come back, picked up a pistol, and shot Colonel William Rogers, who died there at the Battle of Corinth. What we have with that is the period engraving, which is what we used at the time for newspaper reporting, of Charles Bonner shooting Colonel William Rogers at the defense of Battery Robinette at the Battle of Corinth of Mississippi. The neat thing about it is we were always wondering if the drum had ever been cut down, in that it's only 8 inches deep, which is quite shallow for a Civil War drum. I found no evidence that that drum was ever cut down. The period engraving that we have shows a short drum being carried by the drummer. This story had been collaborated by the curator at the battlefield of Corinth National Battlefield Park. So we feel pretty accurate that it's a good story, and the engraving is accurate, bringing a lot of value to the drum, which had been painted over the front with an eagle carrying a flag, and Charles Bonner's Illinois and Missouri regiments and companies, as well as his in and out dates and his name. The drum had previously been owned by Chet Falzarano, who I'd gotten it from, who is a Gretsch Gladstone collector and author of several books on the subject. He was going down to buy a Gladstone drum from one of Benny Goodman's old drummers, Nick Toole, and that's when he saw the drum and purchased it from Nick, who had purchased it in 1955 from a music store somewhere. That's where the story got a little fuzzy. Apparently Bonner moved out to Long Beach, California in 1889, and Chet had actually found his tombstone and taken pictures of that, his house, and where Charles Bonner stood on the Corinth battlefield. So that drum, with the story and the placard, got a lot of value to it, a lot of historic value. It's a good story. The drums that we try to collect all have some kind of a story, whether it's a maker's label or it's a real odd drum, or we've identified it to a particular regiment, corps, or even an individual soldier. So we try to find drums that we can tell stories to, and that's what On the Ropes is. On the Ropes is a series of essays. The collection really is the drums of war. These are not Ringo's drums. They're played on the deadliest battlefield that you could, the stage is the battlefield, and it just doesn't get any crazier than that. And that's why we find interest in these drums. We try to pay homage to the fellas that carried them, because they fought their war with drumsticks in most cases. Some of them picked up guns. That's what gets interesting.